So hi everyone, I am Mitzi Jonelle Tan, a climate justice activist based in Metro Manila, Philippines. I organize with Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, and which is the Fridays for Future of my country and with Fridays for Future Philippines. So today we'll be talking about the role of the youth in climate justice. Just checking, can you guys see the slide in full screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the role of the youth in climate justice. I guess the outline for today, hold on, let me hide the Zoom thingy because it's blocking. Is who are the youth and why should the youth lead? What is the climate crisis and what is climate justice? And then we end with what can we do? So these slides are for the Philippines, but it's still, this is the only slide that's Filipino centric, I guess. So here the youth is 15 to 30 years old. I think with UNICEF, I'm not sure if it's 29 or 35. I think it's 35 years old. In the Philippines, this is the projected population of Filipino youth for this year. Across the globe, really, the youth are we're not a small number. And it's basically defined as the transition from dependence of childhood to the adulthood independence. And what's really cool about the youth is we're in different classes of society, mostly from the basic sector, so farmers and workers, because majority of people are actually in these sectors. And that's the cool thing about the youth. We're literally in every sector of society, in the LGBT sector, in the workers sector, in the farmers sector. And so you really see that the youth have this capability to unite, and if we as the youth unite, we also unite society in a way. And the question that's always asked, like why, like people always say that people always say that climate justice is being led by the youth today. And the reason for that is actually, and I used to like whenever people ask me why do you think the youth should lead, I never actually knew how to answer that before. It was just like I don't actually know why it has to be us. And then I got to start working with like older generations, and I kind of saw right away why. It's really because it is our turn in the relay race. Like a lot of people, like there's that quote that's like um activism isn't a marathon, it isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And then we've extended that to it's not a marathon, it's a relay race. And it's the older generations are passing the baton on to us, and it's our turn to really continue the fight for climate justice and for a better future and a better planet. And the I thought this used to be a joke, like, oh, the youth, you guys are the ones who have the energy and the physical and mental energy to grasp environmental issues and act on them collectively. And I'm like, but I'm so tired. What do you mean I have the energy? I don't feel like I have the energy. But quickly, like while working with older generations, I saw that, yeah, okay, we're the ones who have that creativity, that innovation, and that kind of uncompromising kind of thing. Like we as the youth are able to say, no, we're not going to compromise on our futures. We're not going to compromise on our lives. This is what we need. This is what we want. And that's like, I think the power of the youth being able to just outright say things without like worrying about other things. And this is as cliche as it sounds. We are the ones who will be experiencing the long-term impacts of the climate crisis. Um, I won't be touching on the climate crisis and the science of it that much in this presentation. So if you do have questions on that, feel free to put them into the chat. So yeah. And what I really think the youth is is that we are a revolutionary generation. If you look at almost every historical movement in society, the youth have been there leading the way alongside marginalized sectors of society. And so this is our generation's latest wave of revolutions, you know, like if anything is possible, it's because the youth are so strong and we're uniting across every sector of society. And then we go into the question of what is climate justice. So when we talk about climate, hold on, I think Zoom is covering parts of my slides. When we talk about climate justice, it's remembering the intersectionality of, hold on, my friends are being really noisy. Okay. So when talking about climate justice, you have to remember the intersectionality of the issue. That it's not just. I'm gonna keep saying this throughout my entire talk. That it's not just a an environmental issue. It's not just about carbon dioxide emissions in science. It's at its core a systems issue that's impacting people. And so those who are already experiencing other socioeconomic crises like sexism, racism, classism, all these things, these socioeconomic issues are being amplified by the climate crisis. So when extreme weather impacts, when the climate crisis happens, people who are experiencing these other socioeconomic issues are already more vulnerable, and then the climate crisis also amplifies the vulnerabilities of these socioeconomic issues. And so we really have to remember that when we talk about climate justice, it's considering all these intersections and remembering that it's not that there are people at fault and it's not everyone. The accountability has to come from the countries, corporations, and people who are the main polluters of the planet. If we're looking at these are the global north countries. We look at the US, it's historically the biggest carbon dioxide emitter, and currently it's China. And these two countries, and not just these two countries, but really global north countries, who are either the historically biggest carbon dioxide emitters, these are also our colonizers. These are also the same countries that until today, even if we're not colonized anymore, are extracting from our lands in the global south. And so we have to remember that our fight for climate justice is ultimately tied to our fight to decolonize the world, even until today, because until today, the existing systems of colonialism is still present, and it's transformed into this system that focuses so much on everlasting growth and capital accumulation, and basically just prioritizes profit over people and planet. We're seeing that in how the richest 1% emit more than double than the 50% poorest of the entire world. So that's a lot of people compared to a very, very small amount of people. And we're seeing from 1988 to 2015, only 100 companies were responsible for 71% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And what does that mean? These 100 companies, this 1%, this 10%, these are the groups and the people, the multinational companies, the countries that are causing the destruction of so many in the global south today, and not just the global south, but also in marginalized communities in the global north. And so when we're looking at this, when we're seeing that climate justice isn't just about the climate, isn't just about the weather, but really at its core, it's about dismantling systems of injustice and oppression that has existed for decades, it feels so overwhelming. It's like, oh wow, now what? How are we supposed to do this? What can we do? But we remember that we're not alone in this. It's not just one person. It's not just one country. It's not just one group. We're literally a global movement across the globe. You have someone fighting for the same thing that you are. Maybe not in the same ways, but you're fighting for the same better planet, better future for a better society. And so a few things that you can really focus on, at least this is what we do here in the Philippines, is we focus on climate education because many of the most affected communities are also the ones with the least access to climate education. And by coordinating with these communities, we can both learn from their experiences in the front line. So our environmental defenders, our farmers, our fishing communities, they have so much to teach us because our indigenous peoples, because they know how to care for the environment. They've seen how the environment has changed firsthand, and we kind of just match their knowledge with scientific data to highlight the need for a really national multi-sectoral climate action. And another reason why I like to talk about climate education is, I guess, because as students, it's something that we can really relate to and campaign for also, like having an institutionalized climate education that isn't just a science class. It isn't just carbon dioxide emissions, but realizing that climate education has to be empowering and it has to be contextualized to your communities. I was privileged enough to have an education that did talk about the climate, but only to the extent of global warming, ozone layers, carbon dioxide emissions. And so growing up, even though I was experiencing the impacts of the typhoons firsthand, I never actually put to it. And I was learning about the climate and I was telling my friends about global warming. I didn't realize that what we were already experiencing was also the thing that I was already learning about, because the way climate education is taught is so foreign and technical, and it talks about melting ice caps and polar bears, but not about what we're already experiencing, not about what people are already experiencing. And it's so alienating and it's not empowering at all. So the climate education that we need is the type that teaches you, and it's not just in one aspect, it's not just one science class, it's something that should be integrated into all our subjects, because there is no I'm gonna get really corny, but there's no math without a planet, there's no history without a planet, and they all fall into each other. And so we have to integrate our climate education into everything, because we are in a climate emergency, because time is running out, and there has been this wave of declarations of climate emergencies in different countries, different cities, and this can be good, but a lot of times what we're seeing now is it's being used almost to greenwash. Like, governments will declare a climate emergency, but nothing has changed, nothing has happened. And then you also have to be careful, because in some global south countries, if you ask for a climate emergency, the national government can do a can make it like a state of emergency for your country, which means it could become a militaristic approach or martial law. So any declaration of climate emergency that we have has to be made and dictated by the people and implemented with the people. And that's so important, because otherwise it'll either just be words on paper that don't mean anything, or it'll be something that can actively be used against people. A really cool thing, and I think Zoom is hiding. Why is Zoom like this? Okay, I don't know where to put the controls. Um, um, Another thing that the youth can do are is to participate in divestment campaigns. So divestment campaigns are campaigns to get institutions to stop funding the fossil fuel industry. Um, it's not just the fossil fuel industry, like divestment campaigns in general is just getting institutions to stop um, supporting and funding different institutions. But in this case, it's for the fossil fuel industry. Um, so something that you guys can do is like getting to see if your universities and your schools, if your government, if your local governments are subsidizing or giving loans or investing in fossil fuel industries or banks. So what I'm involved in right now is this divestment campaign called Clean Up Standard Chartered. Standard Chartered is a UK bank, which almost no one in Europe actually knows about, because all of its market is in the global south, in mostly in Asia and in Africa. And the coal companies that they're actually funding huge companies like Adani, which a lot of people know, I think, which is an Australian in India and I think in other places too. Um, Standard Chartered funds the most coal companies in the Philippines, pours the most money in coal companies also in Indonesia, and in basically over 30 countries across the globe, again, mostly in the global south. And divestment campaigns, especially banks, I think that's such a clear representation of the system that we have today, where the global north banks will pour money into something to get profit, and then all the destruction, all the consequences fall on the people who are most vulnerable, fall on the global south. Um, and that just shows that it's more than just an individual lifestyle thing, because it really is a system problem. So individual actions can help a lot. I personally don't talk about it as much. I mean, I do participate in them, but I don't talk about them as much just because there's already so much propaganda around it. I call it propaganda because the term carbon footprint was made by an oil company that was trying to shift the blame from them to individuals so that they can hide and pretend that they're not the one causing the climate crisis. We've seen that Shell, I think ExxonMobil, so many of the top polluters already knew about the climate crisis and about climate change way before it was public knowledge, and they deliberately hid it because they knew that their companies would suffer if people knew that those companies are going to make us suffer. And so we really see how they prioritize profit. And what I like to remind people about system change, not climate change, is that it can't just be a slogan. It can't just be like a big picture thing. It also has to be a small picture thing, in the sense that we try to change the system in our everyday conversations. We're constantly critical of ourselves and of the narratives that we're contributing to, making sure that we're empowering people, and that we're critical of ourselves and each other, and correcting each other when correcting each other with love, of course, and like when there's something that isn't right. I don't like cancel culture. I don't think it's productive. So no, not that, but like telling each other when something is wrong, because that's what we need to grow. And sometimes that telling each other something is wrong can get heated, but it's something that we have to go through, because that's how we can that's the only way that we can develop as a movement and as people. And really, we just have to remember, like, it's getting really cliche at this point, and I'm glad that it's getting cliche, that climate justice is social justice. We have to remember that the climate crisis isn't just an environmental issue, it's a systemic issue affecting the most marginalized people the most. And saying this is easy, acting it out is so difficult. Like, I have global north climate activist friends who are like, oh, let's amplify the voices of the global south, and they listen to us and they talk to us, and it's great. And but that's easy, I would say, because we're already climate activists, so it's easy to talk to us. What's harder is to talk to the refugees in your country. What's harder is to talk to the BIPOC communities in your country. What's harder is talking to people who aren't climate activists but are also the ones most vulnerable to the climate crisis. That's what's harder, and that's what we need to do. Those are the steps that we need to take if we really want to embody climate justice is social justice. And it seems scary. Again, I'll say it again. It seems so scary, but the youth, we are a revolutionary generation. And so if anyone can do the impossible, it's us. Thank you. You can follow us, the Philippines, at YACA Philippines, which is the Fridays for Future of our country. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And then we are also on Fridays for Future MAPA, which is most affected peoples and areas, which is like kind of like this term that we like to use instead of Global South. And I am also on social media at Mitzi Jonelle.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mitzi. That was such an amazing session. We learned so much from it. All of you guys, please follow the account she just sent. It's Fridays for Future MAPA. Um, or like support Mitzi. Like, she's such an inspiring person. Go follow her account on Mitzi Jonelle on Instagram. And yeah, I mean, Mitzi, this was such an amazing session. Thank you so much for joining our event. It was really nice, like learning from you, listening to you. Yeah, again, thank you so much. Okay, so everyone, next we have our quiz in 3 minutes. I know all of you are like super excited for the quiz. So if you don't